Alright guys, my name is Chuck Neff, and I'm going to be your instructor today. I'm not a Legionnaire, so you don't have to call me sir, so you can just call me Chuck if you have any questions. Before we get started though, I want to talk a little bit about the Boy State program and you guys out there, because we need to recruit more people to Boy State. This year we had just over 200 of you from around Illinois. Back 20, 30 years ago, we used to have over 1,000 boys from entering their senior year who attended Boy State. We'd like to get our numbers back up. And at least next year, for every one of you that are seated out there, we'd like to have 2 of you here, or even 3. And when you go back to your schools, especially in the fall, and I'm sure you know plenty of young men that are going to be 1 year behind you in school that you probably associate with or have classes with, phys ed, whatever. We hope to have, as I said, for every one of you to have 2 of you here. So please help if you think the program is good and worthy, and with more people we can do much more. So hopefully you go back and we can. You'll be our best recruit for the next session in June of 2026. Also, I don't know if you're interested in being on staff in the future, being a counselor, like a city counselor, or helping out with staff. There is a way of doing that. I'm not sure if it's listed on the guide this year, the online guide, but you send a letter to the American Legion, Illinois American Legion in Bloomington, Illinois, and it used to be required either in November or December. So 6 months from now, send a letter to them and request that you be added to the staff. And there's a good chance that you could be added to next year's staff, especially if we have more people here. We're going to need more staff members. So instead of 200 next year, we're shooting for 400 to 500. So thank you very much for that. That's my interest in the program. All right, the executive process class is going to be broken down into 4 parts. First, we're going to learn about the executive branch in the state of Illinois and those elected officials who serve. We'll have a class trivia contest that will talk about certain Illinois convicted politicians. The third part is a look at Illinois and why so many people and why so many high school graduates are leaving Illinois to attend, live, and also to attend college in other states. And then at the end we have a trivia contest about facts here in the state of Illinois, and there'll be a gift card with a monetary award on it given to the winner of that contest today. So go ahead and start. The Illinois State Constitution that we currently are under in Illinois was approved in a special election by Illinois voters in 1970. And it had replaced a constitution that had been in effect for 100 years, enacted in 1870. Under the Illinois State Constitution, it established the 1970 Constitution. It established our 6 elected constitutional offices: Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, State Comptroller, and State Treasurer. And then these 6 state elected officials are the executive branch of the state of Illinois. We'll start with our state treasurer, Mike Ferris. He was elected in 2014 and has been re-elected twice. He's a former state senator from Champaign and a former county auditor of Champaign County. Official duties of the state treasurer are he pays the state's bills, responsible for the investment and safekeeping of all state funds. He oversees the state's unclaimed property program called iCash. I know that a few years ago, a lot of times when somebody passes away in a state, not everybody, the executor or the beneficiaries of that estate may not know where the money was at, or if there was a bank account or maybe a safety deposit box that had some valuables in it. After a certain time, if nobody has come to claim or enter those boxes, the banks or the institutions that are holding the monetary funds are required to give those to the state treasurer, and then the state treasurer has the iCash program where occasionally you'll see people's names in the newspaper. We have some cash waiting for you, and they'll list the names, or you can go online and always look to see in your county who they are. You might want to do it, get home, maybe there'll be some cash waiting there for you, or perhaps your parents or even grandparents. So that's what the iCash program is. And then the Illinois 529 Bright Start College Savings Plan. Do any of you know if your parents have invested in a 529 plan with the state of Illinois to save money for college tuition and college expenses? We've got a couple back here. We've got another one here. So a few of you, about half a dozen. So it's a great program. And when you go to Illinois State University, all the money goes back to you. You can take the money out, and there's a bonus. And then if you go to a non-state university or out-of-state, you still get at least the principal of your money back. You don't make interest on it. But a great program for especially if you have a toddler in your house or somebody entering kindergarten very young. Start them on that program, and then hopefully 12 to 15 years later, you've got a nice nest egg. So each child in the family can go to college. It's something you guys should think about as you start your families maybe in the next few years. Still a couple of years away from that though. Oh, Mike Farrick's did attend Boy State in 1990, our state treasurer. And right now the only state officer, constitutional officer that did attend Illinois Boy State. Our state comptroller is Susanna Mendoza, who was elected in a special election in 2016, former state representative, city clerk of Chicago, and she was a candidate for mayor in 2019. Official duties of the comptroller are all public spending requires approval from the office of comptroller before the state treasurer can actually issue a check. And then the comptroller acts as a check and balance for the state's public treasury. In the 1950s, there used to be a position of, I told you about the old Constitution and then was replaced in 1970. Well, the old Constitution had an officer called State Auditor. And State Auditor, there was a state auditor named Orville Hodge in the 1950s, and somehow he was able to abscond with hundreds of thousands of dollars before they caught on to him. And then he was eventually forced to resign office and went to prison for it. But they decided in 1970, when they were replacing the Constitution, to add the office of comptroller to act as a check and balance for the Treasury. And this happens to be Judy Bartopica. She was the state comptroller for 4 years. She was re-elected in 2014 and then passed away just before she was sworn into her second term. Former state treasurer. I think she was the longest serving state treasurer when she retired from that office in 2007. Ran for governor in 2006 and had served as a state representative and state senator. So there has been a movement in Illinois for a number of years for Judy's amendment, which would be a movement to actually eliminate the office of Illinois State Comptroller. And proponents of Judy's amendment suggested a merger of the state comptroller and state treasurer's office would save Illinois at least $12 million annually in rent and salaries. And that they don't. And with the computer age now, in the 50s or 60s, before computers really came online and became effective ways to keep track of funds, state funds, it was all done by hand. So now that it's not done by hand and it's on computers, it's a lot easier to keep track of where the funds are going to. So, and I knew Judy very well. Her son actually served on staff here for a couple years. This is our Secretary of State, Alexei Giannoulis, elected in the last election in 2022, a former state treasurer. He was a candidate for U.S. Senator in 2010. He has served as a senior director of Mellon Wealth Management. And then he was elected in 2024 to replace our longtime Illinois Secretary of State, Jesse White. Official duties of the Secretary of State are keeps official records for the state. He's the official state archivist, state librarian overseeing the state library. He keeps the records of all rules and regulations that are issued by the executive branch, which are all called administrative rules. And then he also oversees the state's Department of Vehicle Services, which issues and renews driver's licenses, license plates and titles for vehicles, And thus, the Secretary of State office is the office, the constitutional office that everyone has some contact with on a regular basis. You know, if you're going in to get a license or ID, if you're going every few years, if you need to change titles, you've got to work with your vehicles, you have to work with the Secretary of State's office. Usually, there's not one in every county in the state, but there's, I think, 80 branches outside outside of the Chicago area. So I live in Henderson County, a small county in western Illinois. We don't have a Secretary of State's motor vehicle office there, but I can go to Warren County, 20 miles away, or to Hancock County, about 25 miles away, and that's where I do. I do my renewals and my getting titles that way. Our Illinois Attorney General is Kwame Raoul, elected in 2018 and re-elected in 2022, former Illinois State Senator, and he's also been a former prosecutor and staff attorney. Official duties of the Illinois Attorney General are Chief Legal Officer for the state. The Attorney General can issue legal opinions, especially when requested by the governor or the executive branch. And then the Office of the Attorney General keeps records and assists with complaints of consumer fraud. They have a consumer fraud division. If you feel that you've been chipped out of something by a business, either in Illinois or that does business in Illinois, like Amazon may not be based here, but they do business in Illinois, and happen to be Amazon or a big company like that do handle deliveries, you can file a complaint with the Attorney General's Office, Division of Consumer Fraud, and they will act on it and find out if it's a valid claim or not. Our Illinois Lieutenant Governor is Juliana Stratton, who was elected with Governor J.B. Pritzker as a team in 2018 and 2022. She will not be Lieutenant Governor after 2026 next year because she has announced already that she will be a candidate for United States Senator in Illinois. Senator Dick Durbin is retiring, and she and some other there's several congressional Democrats that are also running for the seat. So it's not going to be a given that she'll win the Democratic nomination or be elected senator, but she is going to give it a shot. Official duties of the Lieutenant Governor, and I have that in quotes, official. There are, according to the Illinois State Constitution, there are no official duties listed in the Illinois State Constitution for Lieutenant Governor. You're just there, you're given an office, and you wait to see if the governor resigns or leaves office in some way. Excuse me. But, excuse me. But duties that have been given to the Lieutenant Governor by Governor J.B. Pritzker are, she is chairman of the Rivers of Illinois Coordinating Council, chairman of the Rural Affairs Council, and then she also is a member of the Military Economic Development Committee. So, you know, she is given some responsibility if the governor wishes her to have responsibilities. Here's our governor, J.B. Pritzker, elected in 2018. He does reside in Chicago. He's been a longtime businessman and philanthropist even prior to his election as governor. And being elected Illinois governor was his first elected office. He ran for Congress back in either 1998 or 2000 and didn't win that race, but you know, 20 years later he was elected Illinois governor. Who is J.B. Pritzker and how did he become our 43rd state governor? Well, in 2018, the election, he opposed the then incumbent Republican Bruce Rauner, and J.B. Pritzker did defeat Bruce Rauner by a margin of 54% to 39%. Pritzker only won 14 counties, but they were large counties in the state, including Cook County, which accounts for 20% of the statewide vote totals, and he also won the collar counties around Chicago in northeastern Illinois, and then certain large counties downstate like Champaign County, McLean County where Bloomington-Normal is, Rock Island County where the Quad Cities are, and Madison County where East St. Louis is located at. So that accounted, even though 88 counties were won by Rauner, Pritzker still won the popular vote. Okay, Governor Pritzker was born in California in 1965. He has one of 3 children, the youngest, and Penny Pritzker is his sister. She had previously served as U.S. Secretary of Commerce under President Obama. And then Anthony Pritzker is his brother, and they've been in business together as in financial affairs together for many years. Pritzker's family, they founded the Hyatt hotel chain, and they are consistently named near the top of the Forbes America's Richest Families list. And in 2016, they were ranked as the number 7 wealthiest family in America by Forbes, with $29 billion spread among 11 Pritzker family members. Besides owning Hyatt, at one time they also owned half of Royal Caribbean Cruise, and they are also involved in other side business ventures. But Hyatt is where the main wealth came from. Okay, Pritzker himself, Governor Pritzker, has a net worth of over $3 billion, which makes him the 7th richest man in Illinois, and the 251st richest person in America, according to Forbes. He is the richest sitting politician in the country, and even surpassed President Trump, who, when this was done, had an estimated net worth of $3.1 billion. So they were close, but Pritzker just edged him out. When he ran for governor in 2018, he gave himself $171 million of his own money to use in his 2018 campaign to become Illinois governor, which was a record for a gubernatorial contest in the nation. Graduate of Duke University, he learned his judicial degree from Northwestern University of Law. He and his brother co-founded the Pritzker Group Private Capital, and he's also been involved with founding Democratic Leadership in the 21st Century, which was a national organization dedicated to attracting Democratic voters under the age of 40 to the Democratic Party. And then he did serve as national co-chairman for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008. Okay, the Office of the Governor, responsibilities. Most powerful office in state government. The governor is the chief executive officer of the state. The governor's primary job is to ensure that once a bill becomes law, he and his office are responsible to make sure it is carried out. The governor plays a big role in shaping legislation, either directly or through his staff members, and also affecting public policy. Once a year, he gives the State of the State speech to the state legislature every January, outlining his goals for the year. The governor makes a number of appointments to office. We'll have another slide that shows what some of those appointments are. The governor can issue pardons. He can call out the Illinois National Guard. You mentioned I live in Henderson County, which is in western Illinois along the Mississippi River, and I can remember floods in both 2008 and 1993 when the river overflowed and the National Guard was called out to help prevent looting or keep people and help to keep people away from the flooded areas where there was a threat. And the governor can call special sessions of the state legislature, and he can propose and implement. He proposes and implements the state budget upon approval from the legislature, and we'll talk about the 2025 state budget a little bit later that has been approved by both the houses of the legislature. It's gone to the governor. He is expected to sign it, but it has until the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, to get that signed. So probably be signing it within the next 2 weeks. When both chambers of the state legislature approve bills, the legislation is then sent to the governor. The governor can approve the bill by signing it into law, or he can veto the bill. And former President Joe Biden standing behind him on a bill, or standing behind, this is former Governor Pat Quinn. I think this was back in 2011. Here's a picture of our former Governor Bruce Rauner, who was defeated, was elected in 2014 and defeated for re-election in 2018. He's signing education-related bill into law. And then here's Governor Pritzker shown signing legislation in 2019 which raised the legal age to purchase tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, from 18 to 21 years of age. The governor's power to veto. If the governor does not support the legislation passed by both legislative chambers, he can veto the bill. On appropriations bills, the governor has the power to veto certain spending amounts via what is called the line item veto. He can go in there and say, I don't think that $10 million appropriated there is ethical. I think the rest of the bill is pretty good, but I don't like that $10 million. So he can scratch it out, and and so that's what is called the line item veto. It's only on monetary and budgetary issues that he can do that. He can't do it on policy or any major change. But then the state legislature can always override the governor's veto on any bill, budgetary or a regular bill or resolution. You have to repass the original bill by a 3/5 vote of both chambers. And then if the General Assembly does repass the original bill, the governor's veto is overridden, and the bill will become law. These are the major state departments and agencies overseen by the governor through his chosen directors. And as you can see, all of them are major state agencies, and he has a director on each of those. The governor is also directly responsible for education in the state by appointing the State Board of Education, the Board of Higher Education for colleges, the Board of Trustees at Illinois universities, including here at Eastern Illinois University. He is responsible for appointing members to the Student Assistance Commission, which awards scholarships and benefits to college students, and also the State Community College Board. The governor has the power to appoint members to numerous state agencies, boards, and authorities like regulatory boards, boards and state commissions, public safety agencies, and financing authorities. Okay, Governor Pritzker's legislative agenda. Which proposals were approved by the state legislature? We're going to look at last year first. We're still under fiscal year 2024. The fiscal year always runs from July 1st to June 30th. So 2024, we'll look at that since we're currently still under effect. They did get a $53 million budget, state budget approved and it took effect on July 1st of last year. They had hundreds of $1 million in tax increases, and last year they raised the state sports betting tax. They voted to end a 1% statewide grocery tax, although municipalities are allowed to try to approve that and keep it. I know the city of Chicago, the mayor has proposed recently that he wants to continue that 1% tax with the money going to the city of Chicago. So they can do that. They have the authority to do that. But that can be instituted statewide. There's a $350 million increase in K-12 educational funding, or there was, and they created a tax on credit card fees from retailers, which are called interchange fees. And it mentions here that opponents said that expansion of non-citizen spending would increase from a few $1 million to nearly $1 billion annually, and most of that was in providing health care benefits to the migrants that have arrived from other countries. The state will now spend nearly $700 million per year to pay for the immigrants' health care. Other legislation that passed the state legislature in 2024 included mobile state IDs. And I'm not sure if they've rolled this out yet or not, but instead of having a card, you can have a digital ID and put it on your iPhone or your Droid phone. They erased medical debt for 300,000 Illinois families. They provided additional abortion protections. They passed new rules on artificial intelligence. And they provided help for those with limited English skills. Last year, they also instituted a new state mushroom. They had never had a state mushroom before. and they took the Calvatia gigantea, which is known as the giant puffball. That is your Illinois state mushroom. Okay, 2025 now. We're looking at what's been approved this spring and what's pending. The Illinois state budget has been passed by both the state Senate and the House of Representatives, and it is awaiting the governor's signature by July 1st to take effect, and it is expected that he will approve that budget. It makes nearly $400 million in spending cuts, including $193 million in state governmental operational cuts. It increases taxes on vaping and tobacco products, including an increase on vaping product taxes, which are currently at 15%, and it will go up to 45%. It increases taxes on those who earn money from overseas and out-of-state corporate earnings. The budget provides an 80-cent per hour increase for direct support professionals who work with people with developmental disabilities. And it will increase taxes on retail deliveries like Amazon, Uber Eats, and whatnot. And then the Monetary Award Program, MAP, which provides grants to lower income college students, will see a $10 million increase under the new budget, which will boost the program to a total of nearly $722 million provided to help lower income college students and their families. And this is some of the legislation passed this spring, and most of it is still pending. The governor has until the end of June to make a decision, but it's expected that he'll probably sign nearly all of these bills that were passed by the legislature. Eventually, they plan to prohibit large retailers from using single-use plastic bags. And then they're also going to ban the use of most styrofoam containers, polystyrene, over the next 5 years. And then there is going to be additional stringent background checks for law enforcement applicants. There was a situation in Sangamon County, which is where Springfield, our state capital, is located, where a woman, Sangamon County deputies had received a call about a lady. She was under mental distress. One of the policemen thought she picked up a pot of boiling water on the stove, and he thought she was going to throw it on him, and he ended up shooting and killing the lady. And it was found that he had acted unnecessarily. And then they looked into his background. He had been fired as a deputy from several other police departments, and it was determined that when he applied for that job in Sangamon County, that these facts didn't come out. He should have not been hired in the first place. So that's why they're asking now for additional background checks for law enforcement applicants. There will be additional funding and support for public defender offices in all 102 Illinois counties. There is going to be some additional legal help provided to immigrants. And they've also, like they did last year, they strengthened some abortion protections in the state. Another thing was gun safety that they acted on, and specifically access to minors or prohibited people that maybe they've been deemed mentally ill, and they can officially be deemed a prohibited person to own or possess a firearm. So gun owners could be fined up to $1,000 if a prohibited person gets hold of an improperly stored firearm. The fine would increase to $10,000 if the person kills somebody with a firearm. And then gun owners could actually face civil penalties and prison time if they fail to report the loss or theft of a gun within 48 hours upon acknowledging the crime. Illinois lawmakers also voted to approve legislation that would ban police officers from ticketing or arresting students in K-12 for minor in-school infractions. A lot of times the schools didn't want to deal with something. Maybe kids were smoking. Example would be maybe smoking in the locker room or a restroom, or maybe there was a fight between students. Well, the schools would call the police and want them to deal with it and handle any ticketing or arrest in the way. Well, basically under this new law, this will be banned in the future. The schools themselves will need to take care of what are considered minor infractions. Okay, looking at our governor, what are J.B. Pritzker's political plans for next year, 2026, or possibly 2028 when the presidential race, the next presidential race will be held, or beyond that? Nobody knows. He hasn't made his let anyone know if he's going to run for re-election yet as governor for a third term. He could do that. He has been going to a number of early primary states like New Hampshire, Iowa. He's been in California recently. I think he was in South Carolina. Just kind of testing the waters and seeing if he might be a viable presidential candidate in 3 years or not. So, but we need to find out, is he going to run for governor again? And a lot of people are lined up to run for governor if he decides not to. I would say all four of our main four constitutional officers, not Juliana Stratton, we know is already running for the U.S. Senate, but possibly Michael Ferricks, the state treasurer, could run for governor. Potentially the state comptroller, Susanna Mendoza, could. Kwame Raoul, our attorney general, could. And the Secretary of State could also run for governor. And I would imagine at least one of them would if Pritzker decides not to run next year. But there could be 3 or 4 of those individuals all in a giant primary next March when the Democrats would need to select their candidate for Illinois governor to run against the Republican candidate in November of next year. And then will he pursue the Democratic nomination for president? We just don't know that, but we kind of want to find out, living here in Illinois, what's he going to do here in Illinois first, and then hopefully, he makes his decision on that very, very quickly. And I know traditionally they announce their intentions at or before the Illinois State Fair. They always have the Republicans have a big day at the State Fair, and then the Democrats have a big day. This year it's called Governor's Day. Whoever is the sitting governor is, instead of being Democratic Day, it's called Governor's Day. And that could be a place where he would potentially make his announcement if he hasn't before then. All right, today you learned about that was the first part of the program, learning about the executive branch. Now let's see how much each of you know about our state and the elected governors of recent years who have served as governor of the state of Illinois. And in some cases, as a convicted criminal who did time in a federal prison or penitentiary. Let's all play a game called Can You Spot the Convicted Illinois Governor? All right, this will go from 1960 to 2014, the governors that we have listed here. So, our first governor was elected in 1960 and elected in 1964. His name was Otto Kerner. Raise your hands if you think Otto Kerner was a convicted Illinois governor. Yes, he was convicted, although he wasn't convicted until after he left the governorship. He resigned his office in 1967 when he was appointed a federal judge by then President Lyndon Johnson. But later in the 1970s, it was determined that Mr. Kerner had accepted valuable stock certificates from some horse race track owners in the Chicago area. And so it was considered bribery, and he was convicted in federal court of bribery while he had been governor, so he did serve time in the federal penitentiary. Our next governor is Richard Ogilvie, who was elected in 1968. Raise your hands if you think Richard Ogilvie was a convicted Illinois governor. Nope. Richard Ogilvie served one term as governor. He did lose his re-election bid in 1972 to Dan Walker. And a big reason why they say he lost that race in 1972, in 1969, the state instituted the first state income tax, and he signed it into law. And nobody likes to pay additional taxes, but I can remember back then Illinois roads were starting to fall apart, and I know a chunk of that change went to help repair state highways, especially ones downstate that had really gotten into bad road repairs. So one-term governor, Richard Ogilvie. Dan Walker was elected in 1972. Raise your hands if you think Dan Walker was a convicted Illinois governor. Well, yes, he was. In 1987, after he was governor, he pled guilty to federal charges of bank fraud, perjury, and filing false financial statements. It did not have anything to do with while he was governor, but he became a president and CEO of a bank, I believe in Hinsdale, Illinois, in the Chicago suburbs. And it was federal charges of bank fraud, perjury, and false financial statements for that bank that he ended up serving a 7-year sentence. This is James Thompson. He was elected in 1976 and re-elected 3 times after that. Raise your hand if you think that James Thompson was a convicted Illinois governor. Most of you are right. He was not ever convicted. They called him Big Jim. He was 6'6" tall, very big man. And he is the state's longest serving governor, serving 14 years in the position. And here at Boise State, we have an award called the James R. Thompson Award. And it's a scholarship that is awarded at Illinois Premier Boise State each year to the person that will be elected governor. So whoever is elected governor will receive the Thompson Award later this week. And by the way, when he was governor, he came to every session, all 14 years. Governor Thompson came onto the campus and spoke, and it was always quite a big deal when Big Jim came. That's what pretty much everybody called him back then. We used to have our assemblies, the night he was here, out in the football field over on the other side of the gym, and he would fly his helicopter into the infield of the football field and track field and land his helicopter there, and then he'd give a speech, and then at the end of it he would say, boys, I want to take a run around the track with you. They have a nice track out there. So at the time we had about 1,000 boys, and so 1,000 boys would come out of the stands and would run a lap with the governor around the thing. So quite a man. He passed away about 2 years ago, but was known as being a good governor and great to the Boise State program. This is Jim Edgar. He was elected in 1990. He was re-elected 4 years later. Who thinks that Jim Edgar was a convicted Nope. Ironically, he grew up right here in Charleston and attended EIU. He served as student body president here, but he was also a member of the State House of Reps before election to statewide office as Secretary of State and then later as Governor of Illinois. This is George Ryan, was elected governor in 1998. Raise your hand if you think that George Ryan was a convicted Illinois governor. Yes. Yes, he was. He was a former Illinois Secretary of State, lieutenant governor and speaker of the Illinois House. And George Ryan was convicted of 22 federal charges in 2006. And the charges included racketeering, bribery, extortion, money laundering, and tax fraud. Much of it was while he was Secretary of State. I know that one Secretary of State's office up in suburban Cook County, they were selling truck licenses, like for semi-drivers, commercial truck licenses. If you gave them a bribe, they would take the bribe and they would give illegally give somebody a license. And there was an accident in Wisconsin a couple years later where a family was killed. They were a man, a minister, and they had adopted a number of children. I think it was 5 or 6 kids plus the husband and the father and the mother. And they were all killed by a semi-driver, and he had received one of those illegal licenses that he paid a bribe for, and that's what started the investigation that eventually landed George Ryan in prison. This is Rod Blagojevich, who was elected in 2002, re-elected in 2006. Raise your hand if you think he was a convicted Illinois governor. Yes, he certainly was. And he was known as Blago to most of us, rather than Blagojevich. Blago was a lot easier to pronounce, I can tell you. He did end up, he was given a 14-year sentence in federal prison for corruption, including soliciting bribes for political appointments, including when Barack Obama, who had been our U.S. Senator from Illinois, he became president, and there was still a 2-year term available for his seat, and the governor is a person who gets to make those kind of appointments. And he basically tried to sell it to the highest bidder. So, and as of January of this year, he'd already been released from prison, but he was pardoned by the current president, President Trump. And supposedly Rod Blagojevich is considering now running for office again. Some say he may run for mayor of Chicago when it's available next year. So nobody knows. Okay, Matt Flynn was elected in 2010. Raise your hand if he was a convicted Illinois governor. No, he never was convicted. He was our lieutenant governor when Blagojevich was convicted by the Illinois State Legislature, impeached and removed from office. So he automatically became governor in 2009. Then he ran for re-election in 2010 and won office 4 years term, but he did lose re-election in 2014, losing to former Governor Bruce Rauner. So political corruption in Illinois. I've looked at Wikipedia, and this was a couple years ago, but at that point only 45 individuals in the history of the state, including the 4 governors that we discussed, had been convicted. There's been a few convictions since that point. So most politicians in Illinois are not corrupt or deserving of prison, and less than 0.05 of Illinois politicians have ever been convicted of a crime. But I do have a couple that I want to mention. High-level officials that have been convicted of crimes. There was Alderman Ed Burke in Chicago, who was the longest-serving alderman in Chicago city history, serving over 50 years as the alderman. And he was requiring people, if they wanted to get a permit, let's say a building permit, the main company that they wanted, there was a Burger King on the south side of Chicago, and they wanted to get resurfacing. They wanted to resurface their parking lot, repave it. And you had to have a city permit in order to repave it. So they asked him for it, and he said, well, come to my law offices and we'll help you out. Well, they never went to his law offices, and then they waited 2 years, and nothing was ever done on their action on their permit. So they came back, and they asked the alderman, well, why hasn't any action been taken? He said, well, you should have come to my law office. I would have helped you get it through. But the implication was that you needed to pay him and his law services to help get that done. So he has been convicted and is serving time in prison now. Then there was Senator Martin Sandoval, a state senator. He was chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and he determined there were some red light camera areas, where they have red lights at either intersections or maybe for speeding. Well, there was a company that offered him some bribes. And there was one place that they particularly wanted to put a red light camera. It was in Oak Brook Village. The city itself didn't want to do it, but he convinced the Illinois Department, and the numbers there didn't justify, the traffic numbers didn't justify a red light camera there, but they wanted it there, and eventually he was given a bribe, and he was able to get that through the state senate, and he was convicted in early 2020. He did die during the COVID epidemic, though, so he never did serve time in prison. Several members of the Illinois State Legislature have been convicted. For gaming devices, where you can go in and play the video gaming machines around the state. There were some members of the state legislatures that were given payments of $2,000 per month to support the legislation. And then we have in Illinois our former House Speaker. He was Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives for over 30 years. He was the longest serving speaker in U.S. history of any House legislature. His name was Mike Madigan. And earlier this year he was convicted of basically tax fraud. He was he was working with Commonwealth Edison, and in order to get a rate increase for Commonwealth Edison electric users. He said, well, I'll help you with that, but I need to have all your college interns brought in, let me run them through my office. So he had a number of internships. Then he said, I demand that I get to appoint one member to the Commonwealth Edison board. And then they had a number of former state representatives that worked with them as part of the Democratic caucus, and they had either retired or were defeated for office, and they wanted to give basically no-show lobbying contracts to these legislators, and basically it was several $1,000s a month for doing nothing, but it turned out to be a bribe. They agreed to it. They helped the speaker. They got the speaker what he wanted, and then he helped them get the fee increase that they were requesting. So he's been convicted, and on Friday he's going to find out how much time he's going to be spending in prison. His sentencing is scheduled this week. He's 82 years old now, but it's suggested, I know the federal government would like to have a term of at least 9 to 11 years, and he probably won't get that much, but I imagine he'll be going to prison for at least several years. So that's some political corruption in the state. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Illinois exodus. Why are Illinois residents leaving the land of Lincoln? In the past few years, Illinois has lost more residents than any other state according to the U.S. Census. These are numbers from 2015 to 2018. In 2017, Illinois dropped from the 5th largest state to the 6th, falling behind Pennsylvania. And in 2018, Illinois had a population estimated at over 12 million people, but there's been a net decrease of more than, at that time, 100,000 Illinois state residents since 2013. The initial 2020 census showed Illinois' population at 12,800, but the state put in a challenge those numbers, and then later on in 2022, the Census Bureau admitted that Illinois was undercounted, so now they consider the Illinois population to be just over 13 million. In 2017, Chicago was the only state among the nation's 20 largest cities to lose population, and United and American Airlines reported that Illinois was the top outbound state for the third time in 4 years. And then we look at college students specifically, and some of you folks, what your plans will be after you graduate high school next year. The State Board of Higher Education released figures showing that 48.4% of Illinois public high school students enrolled in four-year universities in 23 attended out-of-state institutions, and it's up from 46% in 2016 and only 29% in 2002. And then there was an editorial published by the Chicago Tribune on April 30th of this year, and it lists the top destinations of where Illinois high school graduates were pursuing degrees out of state where they're going to. Indiana being the most movement from Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Michigan, and Ohio in that order. And then the Tribune editorial stated that when you factor in housing and food costs, plus books, supplies, and other expenses, the total cost to attend a state college now is over $40,000 per year per student for an Illinois in-state student, and that includes going to school at a state university. So why are so many people leaving our state? 2017, the Tribune did a survey. They had 5 reasons: high taxes, the budget deficit, which includes our state pension crisis, crime, the lack of employment opportunities, and weather. And we'll look at this a little bit closer. High taxes. Illinois citizens pay the second highest property tax rates in the nation. In 2017, they did approve a 32% state income tax increase. And see some other areas where they've increased taxes in the past few years: gas tax, license fees, cigarette taxes, increases in cable, satellite TV, and broadband streaming. And Also, when they legalized recreational marijuana and sports betting, those taxes brought the state a lot of revenue. According to Wallet Hub, Illinois has the highest overall tax rate in the nation, just ahead of Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and Kansas. The Illinois state tax burden in Illinois, the average annual tax bill is over $8,000 per person. When measured as a percentage of home values, Illinois property taxes are the highest in the nation, up over 60% in the last 3 decades. Number 2 was why people are leaving Illinois is the budget deficit and the state pension crisis. Currently, 1 out of every $4 that the state receives in revenues or fees goes to pay current state employees or retired state employees, their pensions, and then also for health benefits for both current employees and the retired employees. They're expecting by 2030 that is going to be 1 out of every $3 the state receives will be going to pay for the state pensions and benefits. And then according to an editorial by the Trib, every person now in Illinois, including every child, currently owes the state $11,000 each for the state pension costs. In 2018, the state had a payment due backlog of $6.6 billion. And in 2019, Illinois paid $700 million in late fees on invoices, which would be enough to send 12,000 students to a 4-year college. And this, according to the Chicago Tribune editorial board, shows what out-of-control deficit spending looks like. They spend and spend and spend, but they just don't have enough revenues to cover their spending. Our bond rating is the worst in the nation. In 2017, it was downgraded to just 1 step above junk bond status. It has gone up and down a couple of times since then, but it's still very low. And I believe the records show that it's still the lowest bond rating of any state in the nation. Other reasons why people are leaving the state: crime, lack of employment opportunities, and the weather. The top 6 states where people are moving to are Wisconsin, Indiana, Missouri, Florida, Texas, and California. Jobs in Illinois. At the end of 2024, Illinois gained a net of 32,000 non-farm jobs since 2019, just before the pandemic hit. But 73% of these new jobs are all governmental jobs. And according to the Tribune, that's not a recipe for a strong economy. And then there's a major jobs issue in Illinois where private job creation is virtually stagnant. That's all in quotes. It came directly out from the Chicago Tribune editorial published last month on May 1st. All right, now we're down to what I consider the fun part of the program. It's going to be our trivia contest. So I've got some questions I'm going to ask all of you. Any of you can win the prize that I have here today. But it's going to be a question, and then there'll be an A, B, C, D answer for each question. What I'm going to do, first of all, is have everybody stand up, and then when you are out, when you don't get the question right, you sit down. We're all on your honor to do that. So the first question today is: the first Steak and Shake restaurant opened in what Illinois town in 1934? Was it A, Normal, B, Champaign, C, Litchfield, or D, Marion? Raise your hands if you think it is A, Normal. Raise your hands if you think it was B, Champaign. Raise your hands if you think it was C, Litchfield. Raise your hand if you think it was D, Marion. The correct answer is A. There were only a few of you, I think, over here. If you didn't answer Normal, you're already out. Go ahead and bring it all up here. The semifinalists, basically. according to the 2020 U.S. Census, Chicago remains the largest city in Illinois. Which city is now the second largest city in Illinois? Is it A, Peoria, B, Aurora, C, Springfield, or D, Rockford? Who thinks it's A, Peoria? Who thinks it's B, Aurora? Who thinks it's C, Springfield? Who thinks it's D, Rockford? The correct answer is Aurora, Illinois is now the second.
Yes,
All right, down to 2. Who is the only U.S. president born in the state of Illinois? Was it A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Ulysses S. Grant, C, Ronald Reagan, or D, Barack Obama? Who thinks it was Abraham Lincoln? A? First of all, you both lost. It actually is Ronald Reagan.
Kentucky.
Lincoln was born in Kentucky. But you guys are still at, we're down to the final, so we'll come up with another question. So, okay, here's a good one. What restaurant was first opened in Joliet on June 22nd, 1940? Was it A, Dairy Queen? Was it B, Wendy's? Was it C, Cracker Barrel? Or was it D, Pizza Hut? Who thinks it was A, Dairy Queen? Who thinks it was B, Wendy's? C, Cracker Barrel? Or D, Pizza Hut? Well, we do have a champion. The correct answer is Dairy Queen was the
He's my roommate.
Speaking of Dairy Queen, I got a Dairy Queen gift certificate for you for $15. So enjoy.
Pizza party.
All right, gentlemen, that's the end of our class today. I hope you learned something.